First of all, welcome to Istanbul. It was a very nice lecture about West and Australia. Your information was very good, and the differences between Europe and also the United States was very helpful. And I want you to ask you some questions about Islam, Islamophobia, and differences between extremism, radicalism, and true Islam. First of all, my question is, how does the West see and evaluate Islam as a religion and the Muslim world in terms of the people who practice religion?
It's a good question. It's difficult to answer because, of course, the West is very diverse, and people within the West have very different attitudes towards Islam, towards Muslims. And so what you tend to get is a bit of everything. You have people in the West, and you know, this happens in media as well, where there is sort of this understanding that there are good Muslims and bad Muslims, and the good Muslims are the ones who don't really take Islam very seriously, and the bad ones are the ones who do take Islam very seriously. And that's, you know, unfortunately, that's a very simplistic understanding. And I would say a misguided understanding, but it does happen. I think, though, that we need to acknowledge that that exists with lots of other different understandings where people have an appreciation of the diversity of Islam as religious practice. They understand it's not as simple as people who are religious and people who are not. It's also that there are different kinds of Islamic thought, different kinds of Islamic theology and approaches to Islamic practice. And that is there, you know, that it is. I wouldn't want to say that the Western world simply dismisses Islam as something that we're better off without. It's not that simple.
But are their views affected by the news we read on and see on the television about... let me repeat the question because I wasn't talking to microphone. Are their views affected by the news we read on newspapers and see on televisions? What extremism and radicals do? And because they promote Islam in a bad way, you know?
No doubt. There's no doubt. And the relationship between Muslims in the West and the broader communities in the West is heavily influenced by those political events. You know, if a bomb goes off somewhere and it's detonated by someone who says they're acting in the name of Islam, then that does affect all other Muslims who are living in that part of the world, in that country or even in other countries, because it creates that impression. So there is no doubt that's true. But I guess all I'm saying is that that's not the full story. When an event like that happens, there are political problems that create social problems, but then there are also social responses. People who will use that as an opportunity to get to know Muslims, to engage with Muslims, to build alliances with Muslims, and so it's a complicated process.
Thank you very much. What can we do to eliminate extremism in the Muslim world?
It's very difficult to eliminate extremism anywhere. Extremism has existed in human societies for as long as we've had human beings. It's part of what we are. I think the question is not so much how you eliminate it. The question is how you create an alternative that comes ultimately to be dominant, that comes to be the most authoritative, most prevalent expression of Islam. And I think part of the issue is that Muslims generally, particularly who are religious Muslims, need to develop a language, a discourse, an explanation of Islam that is convincing, that is authentic, and that is authoritative, but that is not extreme. And I think that should be possible, because the problem that I think you tend to have is when you have really a choice between extremists and then people who are not very religious. The feeling becomes, well, if I want to be religious, that seems to be they're the most religious, right? And we need to break that equation. That actually, you can be a lot more religious than that. You can be a lot more pious than that. But you don't be extreme. That's actually something that is not being pious.
That's maybe the true religion.
Yeah, that's right. But it needs to be articulated, because I think what has happened, because of the politics of the Muslim world, a lot of that has broken down. You know, there have been those who are modern and educated and so on, and they're not really religious, and then there are those who are religious and they're a bit backward. And I think we need to change that. As long as the choice is just between those two, then I think that extremism will have an advantage.
Inshallah. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think that better education about Islam as a religion of peace and love, instead of rather than teaching those superstitions, can this solve the problem? Could this solve the problem?
Yeah, it can, but it needs to have some strong foundations. I think if all you're doing is standing up and saying Islam is a religion of peace and love, well, that doesn't get you very far, because at some point people are going to want to know not just that it's about peace and love, but that that's actually authentic, that that actually is true. Not just a statement that you're making because it sounds nice, you know. And that's the real challenge, I think, is to develop Islamic teaching, Islamic thought that has these positive values, but is deeply rooted in Islamic teachings, deeply rooted in Islamic texts, that you can actually say not only is peace and love and so on important, but that's actually authentic. The other stuff is not authentic. You need to make that case convincingly, and then I think you can see change. Yeah.
You're a lawyer, an academic, and a rock musician.
Yes.
Yes. How does this contribute to your life as a whole?
I don't really know, because my life is so busy. It's hard. Sorry, it's hard to encapsulate it. I think I like having diverse interests, diverse activities, because I find that one area of my life is improved by me doing things in other areas of my life. I think if I was just an academic, I probably wouldn't think in the same way. I wouldn't develop the same ideas as doing other things. The fact that I'm a lawyer influences the way that I think. It influences the way I analyse things. I also work in media. I'm a broadcaster, and that is very important. That's very helpful in my academic work, because it means that instead of spending all my time just thinking about academic ideas, I also have to talk to the general public, and I have to deal with news, and so I'm constantly updating my thoughts on things. But I think I think my broadcasting is influenced by the fact that I'm an academic and I have to teach these sort of bigger, more abstract ideas. So I think it's great. You get these different aspects of your life, and hopefully, inshallah, what happens is they help each other.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
And my last question. I read that you are made the White Ribbon Day Ambassador for the United Nations International Day for the elimination of violence against women.
Yeah.
What do you think about the rise of women in the Muslim world?
I think it's important. I think that women are more than half, probably, of our ummah. And I think if they're not contributing, or if their contributions are limited so that they don't get to express the skills that they have, the contributions they can make, I think we'll only suffer for that as an ummah. I think that's our history. There are so many great women in Islamic history, and they weren't great just because they did domestic things. They were great because they were great ulama, or they were great scientists, or whatever it was. They made these contributions. I think it's very important, and I wouldn't say that necessarily we're seeing a rise of women throughout the Muslim world. I think there are parts of the Muslim world where we're not really seeing that, and I think that's a shame. But if Muslim women are becoming more educated, more active, I think that can only help.
Okay. Inshallah. Thank you very much for your time.
Teşekkür ederim.
Biz teşekkür ederiz. Sağ olun.